Huge show today. Massive protests, riots, illegal immigration, insurrectionists break out into violence in Los Angeles. President Trump calls in the National Guard. Things are getting hot and heavy. Plus, Greta Thunberg is picked up by the Israelis off the coast, and she is smiling about it. And also, Elon Musk versus Donald Trump, that continues to go on. Senator Tom Cotton stops by. Tons coming up on today's show. First, right now, you can get 40% off a Daily Wire Plus gift membership with code DAD40. Because your dad deserves more than cultural nonsense. He deserves a full year of ad-free, uncensored content from the people the left can't cancel. Plus, unlimited access to our premium entertainment, including What is Woman? And Dr. Jordan B. Peterson's new hit series, Parenting. Make Father's Day great again. Head on over to dailywire.com/gift and use code DAD40 today. Alrighty, folks, so insanity breaking out in my old hometown of Los Angeles. There is a reason that I left Los Angeles, as long as I can recall, living in LA. Every time you would drive past a Home Depot, for example, there would be a crowd of illegal immigrants who are waiting for work. And listen, you feel bad for these people. Many of them have crossed the border in an attempt to seek work and remittances back home. And many of them are also on welfare. And it turns out that an enormous number of people who come across the border end up engaging in things that actually are a leech off the taxpayer dime, end up as a net cost to the taxpayer. They take part in the public education system if they have kids who they bring across the border. They end up using medical services. And again, this is not about whether these people are nice or mean, whether they are good or bad. They have broken the law. They crossed the border illegally. That is the ones who are law-abiding. And then there are a bunch of people who are not law-abiding. When I say law-abiding, I mean aside from the illegal immigration. There are many people in Southern California who are occupying jails in Southern California who committed crimes that are not illegal immigration. Anyway, federal law says you are not allowed to cross the American border without your papers. And that if you overstay your visa, even if you come across the border legally with a visa, then you are also here illegally and you ought to be deported. Enforcing that law should not be controversial. There is a reason that countries have borders, and the United States, for as long as I can recall, simply did not enforce the law properly. That was particularly true under Joe Biden. Well, Donald Trump came into office in 2016 pledging that he was going to do something about illegal immigration. And he did. The border was essentially closed. At least the rates of border crossing went down dramatically during Donald Trump's first term. Then Joe Biden came in and he opened the border wide to the tune of at least 10 million people crossing the border, either by claiming asylum falsely or by simply crossing illegally between ports of entry or by overstaying visas. And now Donald Trump has come into office for the second time, pledging that he is going to stop illegal immigration. And he has already successfully closed that southern border. And now he is activating ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, to actually do the thing the law says, which is to find people who are in the interior of the country illegally and to remove them. And again, this should not be particularly controversial. Just because people haven't enforced the law properly for decades does not mean that enforcing the law now should be controversial. Well, a few days ago, late last week, there were some immigration enforcement operations that happened in Southern California. According to the Wall Street Journal, federal agents were seen in at least 2 locations in Los Angeles. As word spread, more people then showed up and protests grew and lasted into the night. Homeland Security spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin said on Friday some 800 protesters surrounded and breached a federal law enforcement building in Los Angeles. She said protesters assaulted ICE officers, slashed tires to face public property. More than a dozen protesters were arrested. And then on Saturday, residents of Paramount, a city within LA County about 16 miles south of the downtown area, saw federal agents gathering in an industrial park. The residents began trying to block the streets nearby. The protest turned into a standoff between federal agents and approximately 300 people, according to the mayor, and then lasted most of the day. And things got incredibly fraught. And that is not a giant shock, how fraught they got. What is amazing is that people believe that the United States is so lawless that when federal agents show up to arrest people for being in the country illegally, you end up with hundreds of protesters, many of whom end up assaulting police officers, end up assaulting ICE agents, participating in acts of criminality, rioting, burning things. And the visuals from these riots are pretty astounding. I mean, they really, really are. First of all, LA has become an incredibly lawless place. It's one of the reasons my family and I moved during the BLM riots, in which the city of Los Angeles essentially told the cops to stand down and allow people to riot across Melrose and just destroy whatever they could, burning cop cars on the way. It was about that point when my wife and I, we lived in a fairly decent area of LA, could hear the helicopters above our home and gunshots. We were like, you know what? Maybe we should leave for Florida. And I can promise you, in the aftermath of what's going on right now, there are going to be a lot more people who look at California and say, why in the hell am I paying exorbitant taxes in order to live in a place that allowed every area around LA to burn just a few months ago and now is allowing parts of LA to burn in order to protect people who came to the country illegally in the first place. It's total insanity. It's total insanity. As you know, you can now pre-order my new book, Lions and Scavengers, but this is essentially what the book is about. There are two groups of people in the United States and across the West, people who wish to build institutions and create successful operating systems, and then people who just wish to tear it down. And when you look at the protesters, many of whom are flying Mexican flags, as well as flying Palestinian flags, and a good indicator that you're on the wrong side of any protest is if you're the one flying a Palestinian flag. It's pretty incredible how consistent this is. But these protesters who are roaming around suggesting they need to be in the United States while flying the Mexican flag, that's an amazing thing, because they're not saying that Mexico and the United States are in solidarity. Precisely the opposite. They are saying that they came to the United States as a quasi-invading force because the only reason that they're in the United States is as refugees from Mexico, theoretically, people who are leaving Mexico for a reason. This would be the equivalent of Cuban migrants attempting to escape Cuba who then fly the Cuban flag while attempting to stop ICE officers. It would be bizarre. You'd never accept this from Cubans, nor would Cubans do this. Cubans coming to the United States from Cuba generally don't fly the flag of the country that they think oppressed them and that forced them to leave. If they are flying that flag, it's to overthrow the government of that country. Here in LA, you have a bunch of people flying Mexican flags, not because they wish to change the government of Mexico or because they believe in the solidarity between the United States and Mexico, but because they believe, many of them, that this entire area is Aztlan, that essentially it doesn't belong to the American people and doesn't belong to the American government. That's the only rationale for seeing some of the images that you are seeing. So the New York Times had a timeline of what was going on here. It said on Sunday, the third day of protests in downtown LA began with roughly 20 National Guard troops arriving at the Metropolitan Detention Center early Sunday morning. We'll get to President Trump and his deployment of the National Guard and his calling up of some Marines in just a moment. By about 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, nearly 300 members of the California Guard took positions at 3 different sites around the city. More than a dozen Homeland Security officials in riot gear joined the National Guard troops at the detention center. By early afternoon, hundreds of protesters had gathered there. Around 1 p.m. Pacific, California National Guard, Department of Homeland Security, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers formed a line and attempted to clear protesters away from the Metropolitan Detention Center. Officers deployed tear gas, pepper balls, and other crowd control munitions. Protesters then decided they were going to take over the 101 freeway as well. Again, this followed an entire day and night of rioting. I mean, truly an unbelievable thing happening in Los Angeles, except that this has become de rigueur for the left. This is the part that's astonishing. The left somehow seems to think all of this is okay. The left somehow seems to believe that all of this is just normality. That the new normal is, we don't like a thing, therefore we riot. BLM riots caused $2 billion in damage, no problem. Violent activity, killings by people like Luigi Mangione, of the United Healthcare CEO, fine, because we agree with his agenda. The murder of 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, D.C. Well, you know, Israel is really bad. Like the legitimation of violence by the left is truly a horrifying thing. And when you have the government of Los Angeles not doing enough to shut it down, it demonstrates where Democrats are at. You wonder why President Trump is president. This would be the reason. This would be the reason. And there's a long heritage of this in the Democratic Party, going back to Barack Obama winking and nodding at the Ferguson riots of 2014. We've had a dozen years of this kind of nonsense. And yet Democrats still don't seem to get it. As we will see, they are defending the rioters and the protesters and the people who are engaging in violence. They're suggesting they're not actually defending the violent people, but then they essentially reserve all of their criticism and hatred and rage for the Trump administration enforcing the law, saying that somehow enforcement of the law is the thing that is causing the riots. In a moment, we'll get into the actual footage from these riots, and man, it's pretty astonishing. First, if you're a homeowner, you need to listen to this. Did you know that somebody can literally steal your house? Yeah, this is a thing that actually happens. A scammer can forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, and spend about $40 to file it at the county recorder. Then they can take out loans using your home as collateral. You won't even know it's happening until you start getting collection and foreclosure notices in the mail. Can you imagine if you or someone you cared about became a victim of these scams? That'd be incredibly sad and frustrating, especially knowing there are people out there like Home Title Lock who can help keep an eye on your title. Most people never check on their home title once escrow closes. That's why it's critical to find out right now if you're already a victim by going to HometitleLock.com. They'll give you a free title history report and provide you with $1 million triple lock protection to help keep your home and equity safe. This is why I recommend and I'm proud to partner with Home Title Lock. Many people at the Daily Wire, including people on my own team, trust them to protect what is likely their biggest asset. Again, Your home might be the thing that's worth the most to you. Why would you expose that to people who could then use it against you? You get 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts if there are any changes. If fraud does happen, their U.S.-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix the fraud and restore your title. When you go to HometitleLock.com right now and use promo code Ben, you can get a free 14-day trial and a title history report. Find out if you're already a victim. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code Ben. Also, summer is here. Seasonal businesses are desperate to hire, from kayak instructors to berry farm managers and beyond. People with these niche skills are suddenly in high demand. Let's be real, they're not easy to find. Whether you're hiring for one of these roles or any other role, how do you find top talent before the competition gets to them? ZipRecruiter. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter's smart matching tech finds the perfect people for your jobs. Post your job and instantly see qualified candidates matched to your needs. When you spot someone amazing, ZipRecruiter will help you reach out right away. Just use their ready-made invite to apply messages to personally connect with your top picks. Here at the Daily Wire, we're always looking for top talent. Having the great features ZipRecruiter offers makes hiring a breeze for any business owner, big or small. Gear up for the summer with ZipRecruiter's high-speed hiring tools. See why 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within day one. Just go to this exclusive web address right now and try ZipRecruiter for free. ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter is indeed the smartest way to hire. ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. Go check them out right now. Okay, so let's go through some of the footage because it really is astounding. First of all, here's the video of some of the protesters. And as you'll see, these protesters, some of them are not quite protesting. Right? This is very reminiscent, again, of BLM riots that were called mostly peaceful but fiery protests. So these are mostly peaceful but somewhat fiery, actually. Here we go. There are people flying Mexican flags. You can see them obstructing the roads, standing in the way of the cops, lighting fires. Mostly peaceful, but fiery, as you can see. This is just a couple of nights ago in LA. The police responded with flashbangs and some tear gas to drive people away from ICE centers, from holding centers. Look, these are the kinds of images that you would normally expect to see out of a zombie movie here. And then here is some footage of a burning car. You can see folks, at least one is marching with an American flag. This person at least understands PR, but most of them are marching around with Mexican flags. And meanwhile, apparently the so-called protesters were locating Waymo vehicles to burn. So Waymo is an amazing company that has created robo-taxis. These taxis are very cool. I've used them in LA myself. You have the Waymo app on your phone. You call the taxi, it arrives without a driver, it opens up, you get in, it takes you where you want to go. Again, these people are scavengers. All they want to do is destroy. What the hell did a Waymo vehicle ever do to you? It's literally a robot. What did it do to you? Why exactly is it that Waymo must suffer because you don't like ICE's policies? And the answer is it's not about ICE policies. It's about destroying any system they don't like. That's all it is. It is the scavenger mentality at work, destroying anything they don't like, tearing things down. I mean, look at this picture. You can see this driverless vehicle burning. Right? They literally are calling the Waymos just to burn them, which is really sick. I mean, truly, because it's just pure nihilism, absolute nihilism. Attacking cop cars is horrible, but at least you understand that they are attempting to oppose, quote unquote, the enforcement mechanism. What the hell did Waymo do? The answer is nothing, of course. But Waymo exists, and thus it must be burned. The footage that is making the rounds, that is the most famous, is a protester with a Mexican flag riding his bike, his motorcycle, around a burning car. And if this doesn't sum up the nature of these protests, I'm not sure quite what does. Here we go.
Look at the flag. Yeah, Guy, I see
there it is.
You
Mexican flag can,
this is criminal activity that I hope is people are held accountable for. And I'm talking about the riots right here.
Where are the cops?
A different angle from on the ground. Set a car on fire, carry a Mexican flag around. Okay, take this back to your home country. Here's this guy standing on top of the Waymo car with the burning smoke, with the smoke in the background, carrying a Mexican flag with his face masked. Because, of course, these are people who are law-abiding. These are people who deserve to be here. Obviously. How dare ICE try to deport these people? How dare they? How dare they? And meanwhile, there's footage of protesters prepping Molotov cocktails. And by protesters, I mean rioters. You can see they've got a Home Depot bucket over there, and they are putting flammables inside glass bottles, prepping Molotov cocktails, presumably to attack cars. And, of course, the Mexican flag. Get the hell out of our country. Get out of our country. This is not your country. Get out. You're here illegally, but you're not just here illegally because you're a good-hearted person trying to make a living or something. You are here as an invader. If you are here with a Mexican flag trying to invade our streets while setting up Molotov cocktails, I don't know what else to call you at that point. You need to go. And by the way, it is not just they who need to go. It is the protesters who showed up to confront ICE and took over the 101. I mean, honestly, like the footage here is quite astounding. Here, by the way, are protesters surrounding and attacking police vehicles. A police vehicle drives into the midst of protests. You can see all these people have their cell phones out to make sure they capture the glorious moment when the cop car starts to be attacked. The cops get out of the car to drive people away, but not before the cop car is attacked by the so-called protesters. Again, I know people in LAPD. Everyone in LAPD is trying to get out of LAPD right now. Everyone. The question that LAPD officers have is because they have essentially they can retire after a certain number of years with full retirement. Do they try to stick it out and hopefully get a desk job, or do they end up on the streets? Because here's the thing. If you're in LA and you get in a confrontation with somebody, there's a good shot that you go to jail, not the person who's confronting you in the first place. Amazing. Here is protesters showing up to confront ICE. The police are firing gas canisters in order to get people to move away from ICE. Again, all because the ICE officers are doing their job by arresting illegal immigrants. And you can see people there in the keffiyehs, right? It's all the same group of people. It is a motley crew of people who hate the civilization. That's all. That's all. This is just about basic border enforcement. And they are wearing keffiyehs and trying to destroy cop cars. Here is some footage of people throwing rocks at cop cars. They're on an overpass, and you can see they're literally taking stones and chucking them down at the cop cars. One creative type has gotten a leaf blower in an attempt to dissipate some of the tear gas and some of the smoke. Thousands of protesters, by the way, took over the 101, which is one of the major arteries for traffic in Los Angeles. This should not be tolerated under any circumstances, and it is only because law enforcement have been told to stand down that any of this happened in the first place. That is the only reason any of this is happening in the first place. Okay, now, what is the proper response to this? The proper response is exactly what President Trump did. He deployed the National Guard. So President Trump announced that he would be deploying the National Guard via executive order. His administration said on Friday they would deploy 2,000 National Guard troops on Saturday. We'll get into the legal authorities for that in just a moment. But basically, the timeline goes like this. As of June 7th in the evening, California Governor Gavin Newsom said the federal government is sowing chaos so they can have an excuse to escalate. This is not the way any civilized country behaves. Look at the Democrat incompetence here. Look at the sick Democrat incompetence here. Truly sick. Really. I mean, because really, your takeaway from all of this, your true takeaway from all this is the federal government enforcing the law is the thing that is inciting the violence? Seriously, please explain. Please explain. Enforcing the law is what causes the violence. Maybe it's you refusing to enforce the law that caused the violence. So that's what Gavin Newsom tweeted, 8:09 p.m. 4 minutes later, quote, the federal government is moving to take over California National Guard and deploy 2,000 soldiers. That move is purposefully inflammatory and will only escalate tensions. I wasn't aware that you were supposed to negotiate with the terrorists on the streets attacking cop cars. LA authorities are able to access law enforcement assistance at a moment's notice. We're in close coordination with the city and county, and there's currently no unmet need. This is the wrong mission and will erode public trust. President Trump then fired back a few minutes later, quote, if Governor Gavin Newsom of California and Mayor Karen Bass of LA can't do their jobs, which everyone knows they can't, then the federal government will step in and solve the problems. Riots and looters, the way it should be solved. A few moments later, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt put out a statement, quote, in recent days, violent mobs have attacked ICE officers and federal law enforcement agents carrying out basic deportation operations in LA, California. These operations are essential to halting and reversing the invasion of illegal criminals into the United States. Now, again, you can make the case that the vast wave of illegal immigrants entering the United States is not a quote-unquote invasion. It's a lot harder to make that case when they're attacking cop cars while flying Mexican flags. Just a fact. In the wake of this violence, California's feckless Democrat leaders have completely abdicated their responsibility to protect their citizens. That is why President Trump has signed a presidential memorandum deploying 2,000 National Guardsmen to address the lawlessness that has been allowed to fester. The commander-in-chief will ensure the laws of the United States are executed fully and completely. A few minutes after that, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, put out a statement. One of the main technical issues in the immigration judicial battles is whether Joe Biden's border crisis counted as an invasion. So now we have foreign nationals with no legal right to be in the country waving foreign flags and assaulting law enforcement. If only we had a good word for that. Correct. Again, even people like me who think that technically it is difficult to say that a continuous stream of illegal immigrants over decades counts as an invasion because theoretically you'd have to be an invading force. If they are flying the flag of Mexico while attacking cop cars, I don't know what else to call that. Do you? Does anyone else have a better word? President Trump put out a statement, quote, "A once great American city, Los Angeles, has been invaded and occupied by illegal aliens and criminals. Now violent insurrectionist mobs are swarming and attacking our federal agents to try and stop our deportation operations. But these lawless riots only strengthen our resolve. I'm directing Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and Attorney General Pam Bondi, in coordination with all other relevant departments and agencies, to take all such action necessary to liberate LA from the migrant invasion and put an end to these migrant riots. Order will be restored, the illegals will be expelled, and Los Angeles will be set free. Thank you for your attention to this matter." So again, how did Democrats respond to this? Well, Mayor Karen Bass, who was most recently seen being in Ghana while the entire city burned down just a few months back and then trying to avoid the media, she put out a statement, quote, "This morning, we received reports of federal immigration enforcement actions in multiple locations in Los Angeles. As mayor of a proud city of immigrants who contribute to our city in so many ways, I am deeply angered by what has taken place." Okay, by the way, LA is not a city of immigrants. LA is a city of citizens, as all cities in the United States are. If there are people there illegally, they are committing a crime. City of immigrants. Again, I love the lumping together of all the people who legally immigrated or who are the descendants of immigrants with people who are in LA illegally. These tactics sow terror in our communities and disrupt basic principles of safety in our city. My office is in close coordination with immigrant rights community organizations. We will not stand for this, said Mayor Karen Bass. We will not stand for this. Now, Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, responded. She said, "This is complete BS."
I want to get to this quote from Mayor Karen Bass, California. She says, "We're going to fight for all Angelenos, regardless of when they got here, whether they have papers or not. We are a city of immigrants, and this impacts hundreds of thousands of Angelenos." Also, Governor Gavin Newsom. And the governor. Go ahead.
This is all. It's bullshit. They don't do it. They don't fight for people. They are not. They are politicians who are out there jeopardizing the lives of people for politics and an agenda.
So again, Gavin Newsom's perspective and the perspective of Democrats is that it is completely irrelevant if people take over the streets, attack ICE, attack the cops. The big problem is that President Trump has activated the National Guard in order to stop all of that. In a moment, we will get to the response from the governor of California, who's supposed to be stopping the rioting. But listen, he has priorities. We'll get to that momentarily. First, there's been some concerning research about the true safety of the abortion pill that's worth discussing. A recent report suggests serious adverse effects from the abortion pill may be more common than previously understood, potentially affecting around 11% of patients. Given that the abortion pill now accounts for about 60% of all abortions in the United States, with roughly 1 million procedures annually, this could impact tens of thousands of women every year. This raises important questions about how we approach reproductive health care. Organizations like the Preborn Network are taking a different approach. They reported helping over 67,000 women last year by providing a comprehensive support system that addresses both physical and emotional needs, while also offering spiritual guidance through their faith-based perspective. They're finding that when women have the opportunity to see an ultrasound and hear their baby's heartbeat, it significantly increases the likelihood they will choose to continue their pregnancy. They've structured their program so a single ultrasound costs just $28. $140 can help support 5 women and their babies through their decision-making process. To support Preborn's important work, you can donate by texting BABY to pound 250 or visit preborn.com/Ben. All contributions are tax deductible. Go check them out right now, preborn.com/Ben. Also, when we started Daily Wire, it felt like we had to figure everything out with minimal help. Editorial guidelines, studio setup, production schedule, branding. It was overwhelming. New decisions were needed daily. Finding that one tool that simplifies everything when starting a business becomes a game changer and a lifesaver. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the e-commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the United States. We even use it for our own Daily Wire shop to make sure things are running smoothly and efficiently so you can get the goods. You might be asking, what if I can't design a website? Or I'm worried people haven't heard of my brand. Not a problem. Shopify's got you covered from the start with beautiful, ready-to-go templates that match your brand style and help you find your customers through easy-to-run email and social media campaigns. If you need a hand with everyday tasks, their AI tools created specifically for commerce can help enhance product images, write descriptions, and more. Plus, their award-winning customer support is available 24/7 to share advice if you ever get stuck. Turn those dreams into and give them the best shot at success with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial. Start selling today at shopify.com/Shapiro. Go to shopify.com/Shapiro. That's shopify.com/Shapiro. Gavin Newsom put out a statement, 10:36 p.m. This had been June 7th. Quote, they want a spectacle. Don't give them one. Never use violence. Speak out peacefully. Well, I mean, again, I don't understand. ICE is there to enforce the law. Speak out peacefully. I mean, they could use Twitter for the X. They could do all sorts of things. You know what they can't do? Take over freeways, chuck rocks from overpasses at cop cars, attack police officers, attack ICE officials, burn cars. But Gavin Newsom was very concerned with the Republicans, of course. Quote, the Secretary of Defense is now threatening to deploy active duty Marines on American soil against its own citizens. This is deranged behavior. So just to get this straight, it is deranged to suggest that perhaps we have to deploy troops to stop the chaos in LA. But it is not deranged for the governor of California to put all of his focus not on stopping the criminality, but on the people attempting to stop the criminality. A couple hours later, President Trump put out a statement, quote, great job by the National Guard in LA. After 2 days of violence, clashes, and unrest, these radical left protests by instigators and often paid troublemakers will not be tolerated. Also, from now on, masks will not be allowed to be worn at protests. What do these people have to hide and why? Again, thank you to the National Guard for a job well done. And so, again, that was as of Friday night, but it continued over Saturday. It continued over Sunday, of course. Tom Homan, the border czar, he suggested that if the mayor and the governor actually obstruct the workings of law enforcement, well, we'll arrest them as well.
Are they at risk of being arrested?
I'll say it about anybody. You cross that line. It's a felony to knowingly harbor and conceal an illegal alien. It's a felony to impede law enforcement from doing their job.
Do you think that the mayor of LA is doing that?
If she crossed that line, we'll ask the DOJ to prosecute. Do I think she's crossed the line? I don't think she's crossed the line yet. But I'm telling you, the warning we're sending is we're not going to tolerate people attacking our officers.
Again, the Democratic response here is so insane. Just put aside the moral. Obviously, it's insane on a moral level. On a political level, are they high on their own supply? What the hell is wrong with the Democratic Party? They look at ICE enforcing the law, and instead of them saying, listen, this is over-enforcement, we think that the priority needs to be criminal illegal immigrants, people who have committed crimes other than their illegal immigration. This is a misuse of resources. This is all ginned up in order to get headlines for failing president. Like, that's what a normal Democratic Party would do on this issue. Instead, what they have decided to do is claim that the rioters are not the problem. The real problem is that the enforcement of law happened in the first place. The city of Glendale. I used to work in Glendale. I had a radio studio over in Glendale. And the city of Glendale put out a statement, quote, after careful consideration, the city of Glendale has decided to end its agreement with U.S. Homeland Security, ICE, to house federal immigration detainees. This local decision reflects our core values, public safety, transparency, and community trust. The Glendale Police Department does not enforce immigration laws and remains fully compliant with SB 54. Our focus remains on serving Glendale residents and businesses while preserving it as one of the safest cities in the nation. Unbelievable. So Glendale's response to rioters in the streets is, what more can we do for illegal immigrants? Meanwhile, Kamala Harris, you wonder why she lost? She's still around, wandering in the streets like Miss Havisham in Great Expectations, kind of wandering around, a ghost in the machine. She put out a statement, quote, Los Angeles is my home. And like so many Americans, I'm appalled at what we are witnessing on the streets of our city. Deploying the National Guard is a dangerous escalation meant to provoke chaos. In addition to the recent ICE raids in Southern California and across our nation, it is part of the Trump administration's cruel, calculated agenda to spread panic and division. The administration's actions are not about public safety. They're about stoking fear. Fear of a community demanding dignity and due process. Oh, wait, hold up. Are illegal immigrants demanding dignity and due process? Or have they just been living in the United States without due process for literally years at a time by the millions? And I used to live in Los Angeles. The idea that you couldn't find, like, this was always the joke, okay? Growing up in LA, the joke was that people at the federal level would be like, we don't even know where to find the illegal immigrants. They're so hard to find. And everyone in LA would be like, I can do it. You can do it. Everybody can do it. Just because ICE is now doing it doesn't mean ICE is doing something wrong. Kamala Harris said protest is a powerful tool, especially in the fight for justice. As the LAPD mayor and governor have noted, demonstrations in defense of our immigrant neighbors have been overwhelmingly peaceful. Fiery, but mostly peaceful. They are so high on their own supply, the Democrats. I don't understand. You lost. You're going to continue to lose. I continue to support the millions of Americans who are standing up to protect our most fundamental rights and freedoms. So again, at no point does she say that throwing rocks at cop cars is a violation of fundamental freedoms. Instead, she says that the fundamental freedom and right is to apparently be an illegal immigrant. She's appalled at what she's witnessing on the streets of the city, not the riots, the National Guard. She is appalled by the Trump administration's cruel, calculated agenda to spread panic and division, not at the millions of illegal immigrants that she and her boss let into the country. Totally insane. And this is the unified position of the Democratic Party. This is the unified position. One California Democrat had the unfortunate juxtaposition of being on TV attacking President Trump while suggesting that peaceful protest was happening as burning car footage was playing next to her. This is Representative Nanette Barragan. She was on CNN and she was talking about how peaceful the protests are. Well, next to her was a burning car.
We agree that if you're being violent, you should be arrested. You should be prosecuted. There is no disagreement on that. I think that's an effort that we can all say. But this is not what's happening. We are having an administration that's targeting peaceful protests, people that are there to protest. The president is sending the National Guard
now it's so
because
peaceful.
he doesn't like the scenes. He doesn't like the scenes of people peacefully protesting.
So much peace. So many peace. Wow. So the peace is everywhere. Can you feel the peace? The peace is literally everywhere. Absolutely incredible. Meanwhile, Cory Booker, he of the Mr. Potato Head angry eyes, he was out there doing angry eyes on Meet the Press and saying that, enforcing ICE action or calling the National Guard to quell riots, that's only going to make things worse.
Look, since years before I was born, law enforcement knows it's good when there's cooperation and coordination. For the president to do this when it wasn't requested, breaking with generations of tradition, is only going to incite the situation and make things worse.
It's Trump being inciting. That the enforcement of law. I love the catch-22 Democrats have set up. If you don't enforce the law, that's good. If you do enforce the law, you are inciting the violation of law. So anywhere you go, the law being broken is the fault of the people enforcing the law. Unbelievable. Adam Schiff, the most ridiculous senator in America. And I say ridiculous because the notion this guy should be a senator after bloviating his way through the Russiagate scandal is insane. But California is an insane state, which is why I picked up my company and my entire family and left. Adam Schiff put out a statement, quote, "The Trump administration's calling on the California National Guard without the authorization of the government is unprecedented. This action is designed to inflame tensions, sow chaos, and escalate the situation. If the Guard is needed to restore peace, the governor will ask for it. But continuing down this path will erode trust in the National Guard and set a dangerous precedent for unilateral misuse of the Guard across the country." Oh, that's the issue, is that President Trump is activating the National Guard without a request from the governor, and that's what's sowing chaos. Oh, I see. So it's not the riots sowing the chaos, or the fact that California has refused to help federal law enforcement enforce the law for generations. The problem is the National Guard. Violence must stop, says Adam Schiff. We need to keep the focus on protecting fundamental rights. Again, please name the fundamental rights that are being violated. Truly, what are the fundamental rights? The picking up of people who are illegal immigrants for due process and deportation? That's the fundamental right? What is the fundamental right that has been violated? They cannot name it. Because in their belief, again, the scavenger mentality, the fundamental right is to destroy the system. And if you impede that, then you have impeded a fundamental right. Adam Schiff says, there is nothing President Trump would like more than a violent confrontation with protesters to justify the unjustifiable, invocation of the Insurrection Act, or some form of martial law. So he believes that President Trump is desperate to invoke martial law. That's what he's looking for right now. And Bernie Sanders doing the same thing. So the socialist clod senator from Vermont, lifelong useless person, complete commie moron who's been a blight on the body politic since the day he entered it. a leech on the ass of society, Bernie Sanders. I have more in the bag of insults where those came from. Here's Bernie Sanders talking about how Trump wants all the power. This is just a power grab. A power grab to do what? To accomplish what? Did he overthrow the government of California and install a dictator? Or did he just deploy the National Guard to quell violent riots? Here's Bernie Sanders.
We have a president who is moving this country rapidly into authoritarianism. He is suing media who criticizes him. He is going after law firms who have clients who were against him. He's going after universities that teach courses that he doesn't like. He's threatening to impeach judges who rule against him, and he's usurping the powers of the United States Congress. This guy wants all of the power. He does not believe in the Constitution. He does not believe in the rule of law. My understanding is that the governor of California, the mayor of the city of Los Angeles, did not request the National Guard, but he thinks he has a right to do anything he wants.
He thinks he has a right to... Okay, so first of all, everything he's doing is legal. Second of all, if Donald Trump became a dictator, that would be the first dictator Bernie Sanders didn't love. Truly. Bernie Sanders has a love affair with every dictator. And then he calls President Trump a dictator. Coming up, we'll get to the legal implications. Democrats say Trump's violating the law. Not so much. First, when budgets are stretched thin, Kickoff offers a smart path to genuine credit building without the burden of costly credit card balances. No credit check required, no interest charges, only $5 monthly, and it can actually boost your score quickly. With clear, budget-friendly plans beginning at only $5 per month, no surprise charges, and zero interest rates, Kickoff helps you win big on the credit front. It's straightforward. You make timely payments, credit agencies notice positive habits, and your credit can improve quickly. Users with credit under 600 grew an average of 84 points in their first year with on-time payments. Plus, with over 1 million users and hundreds of thousands of positive reviews, there's a reason why Kickoff is the #1 credit builder on the App Store. Sign up in minutes from your phone. No credit check, cancel anytime. Start building credit with Kickoff today. You can get your first month for as little as $1. That's 80% off the normal price when you go to getkickoff.com/Shapiro today. That's kickoff without the C. Get KIKOFF.com/Shapiro. Must sign up via getkickoff.com/Shapiro to activate offer. Offer applies to new Kickoff customers. First month only, subject to approval. Offer subject to change. Average first-year credit score impact of plus 84 points. Vantage score 3.0 between January 2023 and January 2024 for Kickoff credit account users who started with a score below 600, who paid on time, and who had no delinquencies or collections added to their credit profile during the period. Late payments may negatively impact your credit score. Individual results may vary. Also, summer is almost here. That means dad's firing up the grill for those backyard barbecues. But did you know? Over 85% of grass-fed beef in U.S. stores is actually imported. And that's why I trust Good Ranchers. At GoodRanchers.com, they source 100% of their meat from American farms. Every cut of beef, chicken, and pork is born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States. Plus, there are no antibiotics, no added hormones, no seed oils, just real quality meat delivered straight to your door. Perfect for when dad wants to show off his elite grilling skills without the grocery store hassle. Producer Savvy's husband keeps their toddler chunky. Grills out with Good Ranchers every single week. And let me tell you, it works because that baby is a chunkster. That is a big baby. Give the fathers in your life what they really want this summer, premium American meat they can be proud to serve. Good Ranchers connects your family to American farms with convenient delivery that makes every backyard barbecue better. That's meat you can trust. Visit GoodRanchers.com, get $40 off plus free meat for life with my code Ben. Again, that's GoodRanchers.com for $40 off plus free meat for life with my code Ben. Good Ranchers is American meat delivered. Go check them out right now. GoodRanchers.com. Get $40 off plus free meat for life with code Ben. So as you can hear from Cory Booker and Bernie Sanders and the rest of the leftist crew, they think they're going to stand on legality. They think President Trump has violated the law. There's only one problem. President Trump absolutely 100% did not violate the law. He signed an executive order citing 10 U.S. Code 12406, which refers to a specific provision within Title 10 of the U.S. Code on Armed Services. Part of that provision allows the federal deployment of the National Guard forces if, quote, there is a rebellion or danger of a rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States. And that law says that the president can call into federal service members and units of the National Guard of any state in such numbers as he considers necessary to repel the invasion, suppress the rebellion, or execute those laws. So President Trump put in his executive order, to the extent that protests or acts of violence directly inhibit the execution of the laws, they constitute a form of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States. Now, there are a couple of legal authorities that President Trump could cite here. So first of all, we have to go back to the Posse Comitatus Act. So there was an act called the Posse Comitatus Act, 1878, and it says that the local law enforcement cannot be drafted into the effectuation of federal law. And the military is not supposed to enforce civilian laws. You're not supposed to call up the U.S. military, call in the army to enforce civilian laws, is the idea. The reason that the Posse Comitatus Act was originally passed, for people who actually care about the history, in 1878, it was designed to stop Union troops from enforcing federal civil rights law in the South. So it actually was an anti-Reconstruction bill originally, for all the people who are constantly citing it. Just, that's the history. Okay, well, there's another act that trumps the Posse Comitatus Act, depending on the actual circumstances. That's called the Insurrection Act of 1807. And it was designed to allow the military to put down actual insurrections. And the president can federalize the National Guard in those circumstances and then have them basically enforce civilian law. That's not what he's doing here. Title 10 does not actually invoke the Insurrection Act. Title 10, this particular provision, doesn't do that. Instead, it basically says that they can act in a sort of support role for the National Guard. If you're calling up the military, they can act in a support role, and the National Guard can also act in a support role for local law enforcement. So they are not in and of themselves effectuating kind of local law. That's not their job. So you hear people right now suggesting that this is unprecedented, what's happening. So first of all, the president has, in fact, used the National Guard to put down riots. President Reagan did it in 1987 to suppress a prison riot in Atlanta. George H.W. Bush famously did it during the LA riots of 1992. Now, what Democrats are saying is that in both those circumstances, the governor of the state, in one case Georgia, in the other case California, requested the use of the National Guard. But it's not totally unprecedented. So, for example, in 1957, President Eisenhower used the Insurrection Act in order to enforce school desegregation in Arkansas over the objections of the state. In 1965, LBJ did the same, sent federal troops to enforce desegregation in Alabama. But again, the provision of law that Trump is citing here is not actually the full-scale use of the United States military or even the National Guard to just enforce law, like civilian law. The basic idea here is that they are acting in a support role, which they totally can do. This is a point that Kristi Noem was making, the Department of Homeland Security. Here she was.
Well, if he was doing his job, then people wouldn't have gotten hurt the last couple of days. We wouldn't have officers with a shattered wrist from bricks being thrown through their vehicles being burned, flags being burned in the street, and Molotov cocktails being thrown. Governor Newsom has proven that he makes bad decisions. The president knows that he makes bad decisions, and that's why the president chose the safety of this community over waiting for Governor Newsom to get some sanity. And that's one of the reasons why these National Guard soldiers are being federalized, so they can use their special skill set to keep peace.
Alrighty, joining us on the line is Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. He, of course, was way ahead of the game when it came to using the National Guard to put down riots. He wrote about that for the New York Times in 2020 with regard to the BLM riots. The left went insane, and it turns out, of course, he was right. Senator Cotton, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ben. It's good to be on with you.
So let's talk about the situation in California. Under what legal circumstances can the president actually call out the National Guard or use the military in circumstances like this?
Well, Ben, as I explained in that 2020 op-ed, which you're right, did cause the liberals at the New York Times to lose their mind. It's just basic common sense. We have a hierarchy of authority in this country. First, you always want to see the local police be able to control any violence. If they're not able to, or in some cases, like you've seen in California, they're not allowed to. That's why you have a National Guard that's trained in riot control as well. And the final authority is the Insurrection Act. It's a law that goes back to the founding of the Republic nearly. Many presidents have used it over the history of time. It was used in the LA riots in 1992. The president said over the weekend that the violence isn't yet to that level, but he stands ready to make sure that we are protecting authorities in Los Angeles. We're protecting local police, protecting ICE, the FBI, ATF, and federal property. Look, it's fine if you want to oppose the president's immigration policy. We had a debate on that in the campaign, though. The president won. The American people want to stop the slow motion invasion we saw for 4 years in the Biden administration. They want to deport illegal aliens, especially violent illegal aliens. What you cannot do is violently attack law enforcement and obstruct the proper functioning of federal authority.
So, Senator Cotton, the people who are now claiming that the president is doing something absolutely unprecedented in all of this, now, what are they basing that on? I guess they claim that usually when the National Guard is called out, it's at the behest of the governors, but it doesn't have to be at the behest of the governors. That is sort of just a construct. When can the president of the United States activate the National Guard?
Well, typically, it's when the mayors and the governors of a city or a state refuse to protect innocent lives, refuse to protect federal property and federal personnel. the president can use the National Guard if necessary. President Eisenhower, for instance, used the National Guard in my state when Orville Faubus, a Democrat segregationist, refused to follow the law and integrate Little Rock Central in the 1950s. The president has the ultimate authority over the National Guard, just like, of course, he does over the active duty troops. As President Trump has said, he would like to see the local authorities and local police handle this situation, but the scenes we saw over the weekend shows that they're either unwilling or unable to. You have cars being smashed and set on fire. You have violent street gangs attacking law enforcement and attacking federal authorities, people stopping traffic, not just on city streets, but on major highways, throwing bricks and cement and frozen water bottles at federal authorities. We can't tolerate this kind of lawlessness, and it needs to end now. And President Trump, with whom I consulted over the weekend, promised that he is going to protect innocent lives and property and federal property and personnel in Los Angeles.
And Senator Cotton, meanwhile, it seems like the Democratic Party have absolutely lost their minds. They're apparently incredibly angry at President Trump for actually enforcing the law. They're angry at ICE for doing these federal immigration enforcement actions in LA. And they're casting aspersion at the president for calling in ICE, calling in the National Guard, and suggesting that this is somehow provocative. It is amazing to me that one of the main parties in the United States is suggesting that the basic enforcement of immigration law is now a provocation to lawlessness, and that the lawlessness is actually a secondary problem.
Yeah, Ben, I mean, the Democrats are an open borders party. They have been for a long time. We saw that in the Biden era when we had a slow motion invasion. The American people elected Donald Trump and Republicans last year to stop that invasion and begin to roll it back. That includes conducting immigration raids if you have known sites with large numbers of illegal aliens being employed by unscrupulous businesses. You don't get some kind of magic get out of jail free card just because it happens in a Democratic city or a Democratic state. Federal law and federal authority is supreme no matter how a state's politics work. And you can't say that just because we're enforcing the law, which the American people elected President Trump and Republicans to do last year, then we're going to riot in the streets. We're going to attack police officers. We're going to throw bottles of frozen water and bricks and cement at ATF or FBI or other federal personnel. The Democrats, again, are an open borders party, and now they've taken that open borders philosophy to the enforcement of basic laws inside of our country. They're opposed to law and order. They're on the side of violent, illegal aliens who are setting businesses and cars on fire while they wave the flags of foreign countries.
And Senator Cotton, one of the things that I think is most astounding about the Democratic Party over the course of the last decade is not just the sanctuary city policies, but the fact that the federal government has literally stood in the way of states actually helping to enforce federal immigration law. We saw this with the state of Arizona. We saw this with the Biden administration attempting to go after the state of Texas for helping to enforce immigration law. This is such an open borders party that not only do you have local officials saying they don't wish to effectuate federal immigration law, you have, when the Democrats are in power, federal officials saying that they don't wish to enforce immigration law and that states who do wish to enforce immigration law need to be stopped from doing so.
Yeah, it's a good point, Ben. Not just did Joe Biden open the border, he stopped state and local authorities and Republican states, especially states that were most affected by this slow motion invasion like Texas, from doing some small part to try to restore a modicum of law and order in their communities and in their states. But again, that worldview was repudiated last year in the election. You saw the statement over the weekend from Kamala Harris. You've seen what Gavin Newsom has had to say. Some of my colleagues, Democratic senators, have all blamed Donald Trump for violent illegal aliens and Antifa and pro-Hamas sympathizers for attacking law enforcement and setting cars on fire and blocking traffic on major streets and obstructing access to federal property. This is not what the American people voted for last year.
But Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, who was way ahead of the curve on this, and he said that we needed to call out the National Guard during the Balaam riots. Obviously, that should have been done. This time, President Trump is getting it right. Senator Cotton, really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ben. Good to be on with you.
So what kind of benefits are available to illegal immigrants in the state of California? I asked our sponsor over at Perplexity the answer to that, to list all of the state, local, federal public benefits to which illegal immigrants are entitled in the state of California, up to and including education. And here is the list. K through 12 education. All children in California, regardless of immigration status, have the right to a free K through 12 public education. Higher education. Undocumented students may qualify for in-state tuition at California public colleges and universities under AB 540 if they meet certain criteria. They can also apply for state-based financial aid through the California DREAM Act application. Healthcare. All undocumented immigrants are eligible for emergency Medi-Cal coverage. That's thousands of dollars per year. Undocumented children, adults ages 26 and older, individuals age 50 plus, pregnant and postpartum individuals, human trafficking survivors, U visa applicants and holders, and certain other groups can access full scope Medi-Cal if they meet income and other eligibility requirements. Other health programs, home support services, early breast cancer detection, breast and cervical cancer treatment, family planning, impact, it's prostate cancer treatment, WIC, that's women, infants, and children food and nutrition assistance, available regardless of immigration status, school meals available. Undocumented workers can apply for state disability insurance and paid family leave benefits without a social security number, shelter and emergency services, legal aid. Okay, so that is a lot of benefits to people who are coming across the border available. Alrighty, meanwhile, the media continue to absolutely beclown themselves over all of this. So, in the fiery but mostly peaceful quote of the entire conflagration so far, this is an amazing clip. Okay, so apparently over on local news, there was, believe it or not, a reporter who was watching the footage of all of this go down. And this reporter suggested this is not violent. All of these burning cars, this is not violent. Burning cars is just fun, you see. It's mostly just people having fun. I don't know about you. I don't have fun by setting cars on fire. It's never occurred to me to have fun by setting random strangers' cars on fire. But according to this reporter at ABC7, this is not violence. This is not violence. When somebody's car gets burned, that is just some good, solid, old home fun. Here we go.
Large group of people. It could turn very volatile if you move law enforcement in there in the wrong way and turn what is just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn into a massive confrontation and altercation between officers and demonstrators.
It's all just people having fun watching cars burn. You know, like you used to do when you were a kid. Just like that. These people are so crazy. They're so crazy. But this is the entire left-wing media now. The entire left-wing media has been driven so insane by President Trump that anyone even remotely associated with the enforcement of basic black-letter immigration law is now the problem, and people who burn cars are the heroes. And this is nothing new. The revolutionary violence in which the scavenger left now consistently engages, and for which they consistently make excuses, is truly mortifying and shocking. Now, some people in the United States were making fun of France for watching people allow massive burning of cars and riots in the streets. And they're saying, you import an entire population to do this? Are you insane? Well, it appears that we have a domestic population in the United States, some of whom are very happy to watch the cars burn, and others who are very happy to burn the cars. Meanwhile, over at ABC News, again, I don't know what's going on at ABC, right? That reporter's at ABC7. At ABC News, Terry Moran, whose name is misspelled by one letter, he is the senior national correspondent over at ABC News. And he had posted over on X the following, quote, "The thing about Stephen Miller," and Stephen Miller is the architect of much of the president's immigration policy, "is not that he is the brains behind Trumpism. Yes, he is one of the people who conceptualizes the impulses of the Trumpist movement and translates them into policy. But that's not what's interesting about Miller. It's not brains, it's bile. Miller is a man who is richly endowed with the capacity for hatred. He's a world-class hater. You can see this just by looking at him, because you can see that his hatreds are his spiritual nourishment. He eats his hate. Trump is a world-class hater, but his hatred is only a means to an end. And that end is his own glorification. That's his spiritual nourishment." So ABC News immediately suspended Terry Moran. They said, quote, "ABC News stands for objectivity and impartiality in its news coverage and does not condone subjective personal attacks on others. The Post does not reflect the views of ABC News and violated our standards. As a result, Terry Moran has been suspended pending further evaluation." Now, there are some people on the left who are saying, this is cancel culture, Terry Moran. Okay. ABC News would like to pretend that Terry Moran is an objective news reporter. Now, many of us have been saying for years that Terry Moran is obviously not an objective news reporter. He has his own opinions, and he makes those opinions quite clear in his coverage. However, this mask-off moment for ABC News was somewhat humiliating to them, and so they had to then walk it back by suspending Terry Moran for this statement. J.D. Vance, Vice President of the United States, put out a tweet on X, quote, "An ABC journalist posted this absolutely vile smear of Stephen Miller. It's dripping with hatred. Remember that every time you watch ABC's coverage of the Trump administration." Caroline Levitt, said that this is unhinged and unacceptable. We have reached out to ABC to inquire how they plan to hold Terry accountable. So, I mean, first of all, do I think that the White House should be reaching out to news outlets to quote unquote hold reporters accountable for their coverage? I'm not a big fan of that. ABC News beclowned itself. They didn't need the White House to actually step in and start pushing them to do things. Frankly, I would like for Terry Moran to remain on the air so that we can all claim correctly that Terry Moran is a tool bag and that Terry Moran is completely non-objective, which of course he is. But this is all part and parcel of the media's decision that they are now resistance media. This has been happening since the Barack Obama administration. In 2008, the media decided they were full on board with the Democrats. It was ride or die, and they were going to oppose anything Republicans did forever and always. And that became clear to everybody, which is why the Daily Wire exists. It's why we're a massively successful right-wing media company. We're not the only ones, obviously. The media exposing themselves, I think, is actually the feature, not the bug. I think it's good that people like Terry Moran are tweeting that kind of stuff out. I think that's good. Meanwhile, 60 Minutes is Scott Pelley, who's going around patting himself on the back for a living these days. He was sounding off about the fact that 60 Minutes and CBS might have to do a settlement with the Trump administration over some of their coverage, carving up a Kamala Harris interview, etc. And Scott Pelley, who's just enjoying his moment in the spotlight here, he says it would be incredibly damaging if the Trump suit were to settle. Well, I mean, then he can pay the bill if CBS News loses. Why don't they say that? Why doesn't he sign some sort of indemnity clause with CBS News, whereby if 60 Minutes is the cause of CBS News losing a lot of money to President Trump, he gets to personally pay it. Then he can be in charge of the lawsuit. Instead, he really enjoys putting other people's money where his mouth is. Here we go.
If there is a settlement, and as part of the settlement, there's an apology, how damaging is that to CBS?
Well, it'd be very damaging to CBS, to Paramount, to the reputation of those companies. I think many of the law firms that made deals with the White House are at this very moment regretting it. That doesn't look like their finest hour.
Again, the Democrats cannot get off of this. They cannot. Any sort of bending the knee to Trump must be forbidden. And that includes on their most radical issues. The coalition of scavengers, I point out again, an inordinate number of people who are throwing rocks at cop cars in Los Angeles are wearing keffiyehs and carrying Palestinian flags. What the hell does that have to do with immigration policy in Los Angeles? The answer is nothing, except that you have to recognize there's a coalition of people who hate the civilization in which they live. Period. End of story. They believe that the system is itself responsible for all inequities in American life and in global politics. And so that system has to be torn down to the nail. And this is why Democrats are deeply imbued with this philosophy, and they cannot separate off from it. And Republicans keep pointing this out. So, for example, according to Axios, what would otherwise be an uncontroversial congressional vote to denounce a Boulder, Colorado terrorist attack on Jews is now devolving into a contentious partisan feud. Why? Well, because there's a resolution pushed by House Republicans that condemns the Boulder, Colorado terror attack in which a Molotov cocktail wielding illegal immigrant threw Molotov cocktails at a bunch of Jews, injuring 12, including a Holocaust survivor. And this resolution includes language praising Immigration and Customs Enforcement and saying that Free Palestine is an anti-Semitic slogan, both of which are true. Of course, Free Palestine is an anti-Semitic slogan. They're not talking about freeing Palestine from Hamas. They're not talking about freeing Palestine from terrorist groups. They're talking about freeing Palestine, as in from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, as in kill the Jews or expel all the Jews from the area. Okay, so Democrats are split on this. They can't vote for the resolution because they're afraid of pissing off their wild left-wing base. Quote, "It's sheer politics," said one senior House Democrat, speaking on the condition of anonymity to offer candid thoughts about a sensitive vote. A senior House Democrat told Axios it's unfortunate they're using a serious anti-Semitic terrorist attack as a wedge opportunity to divide Democrats. They know what they were doing is adding something like that in there. Nice little catch to put Democrats on the board, vented a third House Democrat. Well, you know what you could do is vote in favor of the resolution. You could do that. All it would take is admitting that the label Free Palestine is, quote, an anti-Semitic slogan that calls for the destruction of the state of Israel and the Jewish people, which is true. But Democrats don't want to be called on the carpet. They want to be able to condemn anti-Semitism while winking and nodding at anti-Semitism. They would love to be able to condemn violence while winking and nodding at violence. They would love to be able to condemn a person who's an illegal immigrant chucking Molotov cocktails at Holocaust survivors. They'd love to be able to condemn that while simultaneously condemning ICE. They would love all those things. Representative Richie Torres, Democrat of New York, said, quote, "Free Palestine should mean liberating Palestinians from the oppression of Hamas. Instead, it has come to signify something far more sinister, the destruction of Israel as a Jewish state." Correct. The fact that Democrats are split on this is just another indicator that they are addicted to the radicalism, totally addicted to it. Meanwhile, Democrats also cannot let go of the trans issue. So while they are losing on the trans issue, like boys playing against girls in sports, they have no capacity to simply divide off from that insane position. They can't get over it. So Democrats continue to double down on that idiotic position, that totally idiotic position. Pete Buttigieg, who made history as an openly gay presidential candidate and could also run again in 2028, he will, called for empathy in a recent podcast appearance, empathy for trans students in a terrifying position, but also empathy for people who sincerely want to make sure that sports are safe and fair. So empathy for all sides, but no actual policy. Shame on any of us who throws a trans child under the bus, said Tim Walz in a speech recently. That child deserves our support. Don't worry about the pollsters calling it distractions. We need to be the party of human dignity. Democrats cannot get over themselves. They cannot. And so they deserve everything that they are getting. Speaking of which, speaking of the transnational, democratic, left-wing radicalism, Greta Thunberg, irritating child turned irritating adult. She took a flotilla of idiots. Supposedly, they were going to enter Gaza with humanitarian aid. Apparently, they had on like one truckload on this boat, which would have fed like 5 people, which is very, very exciting. And it was an amazing 3-hour tour of the Mediterranean. Unfortunately, the USS Minnow here did not end up on some deserted isle with the professor and Marianne. There was some video of this flotilla, which was just a boat, which had an actor from Game of Thrones, Davos Seaworth. This is his only real sailing experience, is my understanding. He was on this boat, and they took a video of international law enforcement picking up a boat filled with Sudanese refugees. They literally floated right by a bunch of Sudanese refugees on an inflatable. Now, you may have noticed that Sudan is a place, and Libya, which is where they were leaving. Those are both horrifying places with serious humanitarian crises. And this flotilla just went right on by. It went right on by. And they took some video, some very nice video, of these Sudanese refugees being picked up. So what exactly did the flotilla do? Apparently, the flotilla, when they first saw, they were there apparently before the international law enforcement stopped by to pick up the Sudanese refugees. Apparently, when the flotilla first went by, instead of, if they wanted to help out refugees, like actual refugees, they could have picked these people up and they could have theoretically tried to take them back to Europe. Instead, what they did was they tried to give them flour. And apparently the Sudanese refugees were like, the hell am I going to do with flour? We're on a boat in the middle of the water. What are you going to do with flour? You got any sourdough starter kit? Like, what exactly are you trying to give us here? What in the... Again, low IQ radicalism, the coalition, the Omni cause, the coalition of scavenger nonsense. So what happened is this boat, this flotilla of stupidity, was approaching Gaza, and the Israelis have a blockade around Gaza because Hamas is a terrorist group, and they don't want resources going to the terrorist group, and they've already set up the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to take away the capacity of Hamas to distribute aid to itself and shoot people who don't coordinate with it. Anyway, Greta and team were picked up by Israeli law enforcement. The Israeli Navy went over there, and in a peaceful process, they took over the boat, and they proceeded to give everybody water and sandwiches. Precisely as the genocidal army would do. They gave everybody a bunch of water and sandwiches. Wow, look at these deeply suffering people right here. It's a rough life. And then they started handing off some challah to people, give them some snacks. It's a brutal moment for, wow. You can see, look at these vicious soldiers giving people water and snacks. And these people are happy to take it. I'll tell you one person who's particularly happy to take it, Greta Thunberg. Broad smiles on her face as she was given challah. Here she was. Wait until somebody tells her that's Jew bread right there. And there she is. She's wearing a fishing hat and grinning broadly as she is given a challah by an Israeli soldier. Obviously, she's deeply suffering. She's enjoying herself so much. All she wants is the clicks. That's all she wants. She wants attention. She's so desperate for attention. So desperate for attention. She's basically the Katy Perry of international left-wing politics. So she's aged out of the role and she's desperate for attention and she will do anything for it, anything. So after being given challah and hummus by the Israelis, she then filmed a video saying she was kidnapped. So just to point out how sick this is, she was literally trying to float a boat to the people who kidnapped and are still holding hostage Israelis, like live Israelis in tunnels. And she's the one who's being kidnapped. By kidnapped, she means that they picked her up in the waters and they gave her food, and now they're going to tow that boat to Israel, to Ashdod, presumably, and then they're going to fly people home, just as one would do were they kidnapped. These people, it would be funny if it weren't so sad, but it's a little funny. Here's Greta Thunberg, overgrown child. How dare you? I've been kidnapped. That's why my kidnappers are allowing me to film this video and send it to all of you, as a kidnapper would do.
My name is Greta Thunberg and I am from Sweden. If you see this video, we have been intercepted and kidnapped in international waters by the Israeli occupational forces or forces that support Israel. I urge all my friends, family and comrades to put pressure on the Swedish government to release me and the others as soon as possible.
Oh, believe you me, if yeah, that's what the Israelis should do. They should put her in a lifeboat and just be like, okay, you're released. Enjoy yourself. But they're not going to. They'll bring her back to Israel, and then they will presumably send her on a plane. Maybe they'll make her sail, right? Because the plane has carbon emissions. I mean, again, I think the best thing they could do for the planet is put her in a rowboat and just leave her out there. And then they can see if she, number one, can make it all the way to Gaza on her own, and number two, she can be environmentally friendly, because that is the most environmentally friendly solution, probably. This is your international left. What amazing people they are, truly. Alrighty. Meanwhile, speaking of the hyperactive, insane left, the left has sympathy for all the wrong people. There is something called the Innocence Project. You've heard about it in the media. It is a project that is designed, presumably, to free people on death row who have been put there through no fault of their own. They were wrongly convicted. That's not really what it's about. Our friend Allie Beth Stuckey is here to explain. She, of course, is a wife, mom of three, and host of the podcast Relatable, where she analyzes culture, theology, and politics from a Christian conservative perspective. And she's the New York Times bestselling author of Toxic Empathy and You're Not Enough, and That's Okay. Allie, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you have been covering in great detail the Innocence Project. Now, this, of course, has been a group that has been feted by the media, treated as absolutely wonderful because supposedly their goal is to get people who are innocent of crimes out of prison where they were wrongly convicted. But you've uncovered some facts about the actual stuff that they do and what happens to some of the people who are released thanks to the work of the Innocence Project. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, of course, it sounds good. None of us want a wrongly convicted person to be in prison. We definitely don't want them to endure the death penalty. And so an organization that says that they are freeing people who have been wrongly convicted sounds really good. Their PR challenge isn't very big. They can easily get people on their side by kind of spinning this narrative. So they'll pick a particular kind of person, not just any person that's in prison. It's typically an immigrant. It's typically some kind of racial minority. It's typically someone maybe with a special needs diagnosis. That was true in the state of Texas with someone by the name of Robert Robertson, whom they claim had an autism diagnosis, and that's why he got convicted. But they will conveniently leave out many details from the case in order to convince people that our justice system is unfairly discriminating against people who are different. But when you dig into it, you see that a lot of the people that they are defending are guilty of very heinous crimes.
So one of the people that you mentioned was, of course, this Robert Robertson character who was convicted of murdering his 2-year-old daughter, and he was about to be executed. But the Innocence Project took up his case and they sort of painted him as someone with special needs, as an innocent autistic dad. What was the actual story?
Yeah, the actual story is, if you dig into the witness testimony, if you dig into the testimonies of the doctors and the nurses who took care of Nikki, this baby, in the ER, he had prior 17 felony convictions. He had actually been accused of abusing his exes, of abusing other children that were in his care. So why he was out of prison, I'm not really sure. But he brought his child unconscious to the ER. A nurse testified that the back of her skull was mushy, that her brain had moved to the right, from the right to the left. She had injuries that were consistent with sexual assault, and they concluded that this couldn't have been accidental. He claimed that, she fell off the bed, but her injuries were consistent with very traumatic abuse. And the Innocence Project says, this was based on this debunked science of shaken baby syndrome. But that's actually not why he was convicted. There was a lot more evidence that ended up convicting him, had nothing to do with shaken baby syndrome. He wasn't diagnosed with autism, if it's even an accurate diagnosis, until 15 years after his conviction. So the Innocence Project kind of worked with him to get that diagnosis, and then, of course, has used that to make him seem like what they've used is a Forrest Gump type figure, which is very strange characteristic of someone who, in all likelihood, murdered his 2-year-old daughter.
Now, again, as you mentioned, the media have treated the Innocence Project sort of in the same way they treated BLM, as a wondrous civil rights group that is only concerned with helping innocent people. But the reality is that, of course, it is a far-left project. You detail exactly who's behind the Innocence Project, who their founders were, who their financial backing is. Can you talk about that?
Yes, it shouldn't come as a surprise that they get a lot of their funding from George Soros's Open Society. All of the people that run the Innocence Project, at least now, maybe this hasn't been true forever, but they are exclusively on the left. They have worked for left-wing organizations. They have fought very hard for the release of convicted criminals that they see as kind of left-wing activists, like cop killers, members of the Black Panthers. And of course, it goes all the way back to the OJ trial. The attorneys that were defending OJ were the ones that actually helped start the Innocence Project. This is really more about so-called racial equity and racial equality, of course, quote unquote, the belief that our justice system unfairly discriminates against Black people, and that in order to right that wrong, we have to have fewer Black people and fewer people who are part of these so-called marginalized communities out of jail, whether or not they committed a crime. But they know if they can pick someone who seems wrongly convicted, and maybe in some cases they are wrongly convicted, they can get people to start doubting our justice system in general. And their big goal is to make everyone against the death penalty, no matter the crime committed.
So what has been their impact in terms of, sort of the broader American public? Obviously, there are a lot of interest groups out there, but they've been a pretty impactful one.
Yes. I mean, you have people on both the left and the right who have worked with the Innocence Project. And I don't want to blame everyone who has worked with them because, again, it seems like a very worthy goal. And their narrative, the documentaries that they help put out are extremely persuasive. And so they do work hard to get both Republicans and Democrats on their side. And it's understandable because Republicans obviously are skeptical of the government. We can understand a situation in which maybe someone was wrongly convicted. And because we're anti-big government and an organization says, we're just trying to hold the government accountable, that might sound good to us. And so you get a lot of people who I think are well-intentioned, but support the pursuits of the Innocence Project without maybe fully looking into the case that they are now getting involved in. And then, of course, support for the death penalty has decreased drastically since the early 90s when the Innocence Project was founded. We don't know for sure that the Innocence Project has driven that exclusively, but it certainly has worked in their favor.
Well, that is Allie Beth Stuckey. You should check out all of her work available on her podcast. Go check it out right now. Her podcast, of course, is Relatable. Allie, thanks so much for your work.
Thank you, Ben.
Meanwhile, the fallout from the Elon Musk Donald Trump fight continues. Speaker Mike Johnson, I think, speaks for a lot of people when he says, I hope they can reconcile. Okay, listen, the reality is, in the end, the fallout from this is going to be relatively minimal, at least in the short term. In the short term, SpaceX is going to continue to get government contracts because the United States government has no other choice and no other option. And meanwhile, the big beautiful bill is very likely to pass because Elon Musk does not have the capacity to move Republican senators and congresspeople away from President Trump. So the end basically ends up the same. Here's Speaker Johnson.
I'm not going to get into the strategy of what happens with all of that. I mean, what I'm trying to do is make sure that all of this gets resolved quickly, that we get the one big beautiful bill done, and that hopefully these two titans can reconcile. I think the president's head is in the right place, and he said a couple of days ago he's moving on because he must. He has a huge number of responsibilities on his plate, and he can't get caught up in a Twitter war.
Now, meanwhile, President Trump is saying that if Elon Musk tries to back Democrats against Republicans in the primaries in 2026, then Trump will take action against him. Now, again, I don't think that is a particular rarity. Now, I do not think that government contracts, which again should be handed out to the most meritorious company, should be based on the politics of the person who runs the company per se. If Elon is making Dragon X, but also supporting Democratic candidates, and we need Dragon X, we should use Dragon X. With that said, politics is a brutal game. And here is President Trump via Kristen Welker responding to Elon Musk.
Musk spent more than $250 million helping Trump return to the White House. Musk posting this week, "Without me, Trump would have lost the election." As for concerns that Musk might fund Democrats in the future, President Trump told me if he does, he'll have to pay the consequences.
Now, meanwhile, again, Elon is trying, I think, to back out of this conflict. Elon has deleted a bunch of tweets mentioning the Jeffrey Epstein files, for example. He has scrubbed a bunch of tweets. And, I think that's appropriate. His Epstein attacks are the ones that are least likely to be true. It's kind of just conflagration for the sake of conflagration. Caroline Leavitt over at the White House was asked about the fight between Musk and Trump, and she essentially deflected it.
Now, we know that there was real disrespect in a lot of those X posts from Elon Musk, for sure. But did he actually get physical? Was there a fist fight that he body checked the Treasury Secretary?
I certainly wouldn't describe it as a fist fight, Maria. It was definitely a disagreement. Although I was not there, I didn't witness it with my own eyes. I heard about it through secondhand reporting. But again, we've moved on from that. The president has moved on from it. And the entire administration is focusing on passing this bill.
And so, again, I think that when Caroline Leavitt says that, that's probably the right tack. It seems as though this thing is going to cool down rather than heating up at this point in time. Now, does this have ramifications for the future? Sure. Because the reality is that the Trump coalition was always an anti-left coalition. It was never a particularly conservative coalition. By this, I mean, there is open debate inside the right under the sort of mantle of the Trump movement on pretty much every topic, ranging from immigration. We've seen hard-fought battles over, for example, H-1B visas. And there are still people in the Trump kind of camp who, for example, think that the prioritization of the deportation of criminally illegal immigrants should take sort of top slot. There are people who say we need to work on deporting literally everyone who is here illegally. When it comes to abortion, you have pro-choicers, you have pro-lifers. When it comes to same-sex marriage, you have pro and anti. When it comes to foreign policy, you have isolationists and you have people who are more hawkish. You have a wide variety of views that all fall under the rubric of anti-the left, anti-the Democratic Party, specifically because the Democratic Party is insane and radical. However, there are indeed fractures inside that party, and the Musk-Trump breakup could highlight some of those fractures because a lot of the tech guys are on board with President Trump so long as he stays pro-business. If he moves into the sort of populist Steve Bannon camp, economically speaking, you're going to see a lot of those people abandon ship. They're going to move off. Now, for the moment, they may not go to the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party is so wildly anti-business, but it does put them back up for grabs. And that does mean something to the coalition of the sort of Trump base. What does that look like for 2028 when you don't have a larger-than-life figure like President Trump heading things up? And when you talk about sort of the winners and the losers from this entire conflict, obviously, no one is a big winner. But the people who are set to sort of lose the most, I'd say the vice president of the United States is in an awkward position. J.D. Vance obviously has one foot in Silicon Valley and he has one foot in blue-collar populism. Politically speaking, he has to stay with the blue-collar populists. That's President Trump's real base. Those are the people that President Trump thinks he represents. But J.D. also has obviously deep ties to people like David Sachs and Peter Thiel and a bunch of folks over in Silicon Valley. And that is definitely an awkward position for him to be in. Now, JD's really good at this. I'm assuming that he can provide the glue to hold these parts of the coalition together, specifically in his own person for something like a 2028. However, does this make things more awkward? Absolutely. And it gets even more awkward if, for example, Elon continues to lean on JD, or if, for example, JD Vance has to face down a more tech-friendly opposition than even he is in a 2028 primary. So it gets awkward for vice president. It gets awkward for the tech bros who are currently in the administration, who are very much allied with Musk. If Donald Trump should swivel again toward that populist economic position in direct opposition to an Elon Musk, that could create fractures all over the place. So is this the beginning of a larger fracturing, or is this just Elon going off on Trump, Trump going off on Elon? Everything kind of gets spackled over and we move on with our lives. A little bit too early to say at this point in time. Alrighty, as the show continues, the latest on the big, beautiful bill. Is it actually going to get passed? We'll get to that in a moment. Remember, in order to watch, you actually have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.